Verstappen blasts Norris for needing team orders to challenge for the title, Mercedes reverts to an old spec floor, and the drivers discuss more about F1 race bans after K-Mag's ban. Do consider subscribing to the channel. Now let's get straight into the latest F1 news. Mercedes will be going back to a previous spec W15 floor in Baku as the team try to find the cause of their post-summer break slump. Mercedes went into the F1 2024 summer shutdown, carrying great momentum after claiming 3 wins from 4 races, but have not been able to hit those heights since the season resumed, with P5 their best result across the Zandvoort and Monza rounds. At the Belgian Grand Prix, Mercedes introduced a new floor and diffuser for the W15. The signs were positive there as Lewis Hamilton took the win, in what would have been a Mercedes 1-2 before George Russell was stripped of the win for an underweight car. But the performance has not been at that level since. Mercedes believe the upgrades have increased the W15's downforce, though are assessing whether the package has introduced any unintended impacts on the handling. And as part of the analysis, Mercedes will revert to the old floor for this weekend's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. "I think that there's lots of question marks on a lot of it," said Hamilton in regards to Mercedes's post-summer break dip. "I think we're just trying to understand it. It could be a number of things. It could be track dependent. It could be the upgrade. My gut is telling me it's probably the upgrade, but it's hard to see the difference between the two. But we're going to try this weekend, roll back on some of it and see whether or not we can spot it. There's a lot of work going on just to analyze it, because it really gives the team a direction of where they're going in development, not only for this car, for the next year as well." Russell was presented with Hamilton's gut feeling that the upgrade was to blame for Mercedes's Zandvoort and Monza setbacks, leading him to stress that the performance gain was not expected to be significant with the updated floor. However, with the old floor returning for Baku, it gives Mercedes clarity on what that will offer. "We'll see this weekend," said Russell when asked for his feeling on the impact of the upgrade. "The upgrade wasn't a substantial performance improvement, and sometimes you've got to look at things just objectively. And we brought a new floor, we dropped in performance, and that was the main thing that changed. We knew the upgrade wasn't kind of going to set the world on fire. It was just sort of another step in the direction that we've been pursuing. So, reverting back to the sort of pre-spa iteration of floor, if everything were to be absolutely correct on paper, it was a small delta. So, I think it's better the devil you know sometimes. We know what that floor offers. We know exactly where the setup needs to be. And sometimes, with a new upgrade, it takes a number of races to sort of learn and understand." However, Russell doubts Mercedes are going to go from Baku to Singapore armed with a clear answer on whether or not the floor was where they went wrong. He also teased another upgrade to come for the W15. "I don't think, no matter the performance this weekend, we will come away and conclusively say the floor was or was not the problem," he claimed. "I think we'll just get through this race weekend, see how we get on, and it's not going to be too long until we have another new upgrade, which will change things once again." Russell also believes that the tight nature at the front of the Formula One grid, with F1 2024 so far seeing 7 different race winners, has been making for more extreme swings in fortunes when not quite nailing a race weekend. "I think now Formula One is more competitive than we've seen it for 10 years maybe, in terms of the number of drivers and teams who can compete for the good result," he said. "I think if we take last year as an example, if we were 2/10 off the pace, you'd finish in the same position. Or if you overachieve by a 10th or 2, you'd probably also finish in the same position. The same goes for Red Bull. They could have an off weekend by 3/10 and they'd still win the race, and it will just go under the radar. So I think we've had 2 weekends where we have dipped in form slightly, potentially not quite nailed a number of things, but it could have easily swung a different direction. I started 3rd last week at Monza, was in 3rd in Zandvoort, and if the race had panned out very slightly differently, could have potentially ended up on the podium, and we wouldn't be talking about this different performance. So I think it just goes to show that unless you nail your weekends, you'll be sort of punished for it." Mercedes sit P4 in the F1 2024 Constructors' Championship standings ahead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, 115 points behind Ferrari, a position ahead. Lewis Hamilton made reference to his McLaren and Mercedes' success when playing down the suggestion of disappointment after Adrian Newey picked Aston Martin over Ferrari. After months of speculation over what could be next for F1 design guru Adrian Newey as he prepares for his full Red Bull departure, that question has been answered with Newey to join Aston Martin in a long-term deal from F1 2025 as managing technical partner, a deal which will also see him become a team shareholder. Ferrari had been a consideration for NEWEY, the team which seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton joins for F1 2025, who spoke previously of his desire to work alongside him. Asked after NEWEY's Red Bull exit was announced how much he would like to work with him at Ferrari, Hamilton said, "Very much. Adrian's got such a great track record, and has just done an amazing job through his career in engaging with teams and the knowledge that he has, and I think he would be an amazing addition. I think they've already got a great team. They're already making huge progress, strides forwards. Their car is quicker this year. But yeah, it would be a privilege to work with him. If I was to do a list of people that I'd love to work with, he would absolutely be at the top of it." However, Hamilton missing out on that chance to work with NEWEY has not set him back in his Ferrari project. After all, Hamilton tasted title success with McLaren and Mercedes without NEWEY being there. Asked ahead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix whether any part of him is disappointed that NEWEY will not join him at Ferrari, Hamilton replied, "Honestly, no. However, Hamilton missing out on that chance to work with NEWEY has not set him back in his Ferrari project. After all, Hamilton tasted title success with McLaren and Mercedes without NEWEY being there." Asked ahead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix whether any part of him is disappointed that NEWEY will not join him at Ferrari, Hamilton replied, "Honestly, no. I feel like whilst I mentioned before that it would be an honor to work with Adrian, I've been privileged to work with two championship-winning teams that didn't have Adrian, for example. And I think probably any team would have been happy to have had him, but at the end of the day, he had to do what's best for him. It doesn't change anything for me or my goal or my focus with the next move. So I still believe 100% that there's lots that we can do." Hamilton will replace Carlos Sainz at Ferrari, who subsequently agreed a multi-year deal with Williams. McLaren is throwing its weight behind Lando Norris over the remaining third of the F1 2024 championship, with a change in approach to the papaya rules. McLaren's papaya rules became part of the F1 vernacular in recent weeks, the framework under which Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri are allowed to battle each other. Up until the Monza weekend, McLaren had allowed its drivers to race hard against each other, to the point where Oscar Piastri was allowed to finish ahead of Lando Norris on track, despite the British driver being much closer to Max Verstappen in the Drivers' Championship. With Norris trying to close down a 62-point lead over the remaining 8 Grand Prix weekends, McLaren has now changed its approach as team boss Andrea Stella told the BBC, "We will bias our support to Lando, but we want to do it without too much compromise on our principles. Our principles are that the team interest always comes first. Sportsmanship for us is important in the overall way we go racing, and then we want to be fair to both drivers." At Monza, McLaren turned a 1-2 starting grid into a loss to Ferrari's Charles Leclerc as Piastri overtook Norris on the first lap, wrong-footing the British driver to the extent it allowed Leclerc to sneak past. What we don't want to see anymore is a situation like in Monza in which we enter a chicane P1, P2, and we exit P1, P3. Because that is a detriment to the team, Stella said. The team interest comes first, and these are the situations that above all we need to fix because eventually, as a matter of fact, the way we entered the race in Monza left the door open this situation. After Monza, 3 objectives. We need to make sure that anything that happens on track is not to the detriment of the team. Second objective, how do we win both championships, both drivers committed to help? But what we don't want to do is win in a reckless way. Those are the 3 topics, and they define the way we go racing in Baku. This will be updated after Baku. Now comfortable in the knowledge that he will have less worry coming from the other side of the McLaren garage, Norris spoke about the changes to the papaya rules ahead of the Azerbaijan weekend. "I mean, good, thankful," Norris responded to media when asked for his thoughts on the change of approach. "He's still fighting for his own racing. He's still going out and doing his stuff. It could be that there's no time this year that he needs to help me, so it's more that I've got Oscar's help when needs be, but he's still going out with the intent in every session of just fighting for himself and going to do his job." Norris denied Piastri would be asked to give up wins if he ends up in front of Norris and said, "It'll probably be for lower positions, but if he's fought for a win and he's deserving of a win, then he deserves to win, so probably not." As for whether he's happy to see his team finally make a decision on how to structure their drivers going forward, Norris replied, "We've had decisions before, and we've had things that we've run through. We've just not publicly said it. So it's more that we've just told you what you want to hear finally than anything else. But we've always worked well as a team. I think now there's a bit more of a structure to it and an understanding that we have internally on for what positions will change, for what scenarios will change, how we can help one another, and obviously, how he can help me. But it's not like he goes out every session now and that's his only job. If he goes out and he's better than me, performs better than me, outqualifies me and wins the race, that's because he's done a better job. We work very well together. I think as drivers, you always want to fight for yourself. So there's always going to be things which I'll be biased towards on my side, and he's going to be biased in his side, but everything we've done is come together as the best compromises for one another. Yeah, we have our own principles. We have our own way of working. Nothing will go unnoticed from what he might do. But battles like at Monza will still be permitted, Norris stated, explaining. Yes, because I think there'll be certain times when it's just not smart to battle, though. I think if you go into lap 1 and that's on your mind, that's the wrong approach. I think you both have to go into lap 1 with the right approach, which is to attack and to try and go forward. So, as soon as you start thinking of other things, that's normally when it starts to go wrong. So I think Monza was a slightly different case. But yeah, we looked back at that and we've resolved that. But from now on, we're still fighting for each other. But from that point on, then we'll try and help one another. Given that victories won't be ordered over to Norris and battling on lap 1 is still permitted, what exactly has changed? A lot of that's between us, Norris said. But to say as simply as, Monza, the second and third would have been swapped around, something like that. As the driver expected to now fall in behind his teammate when the circumstances require, Piastri couldn't hide the fact that, in an ideal world, he wouldn't have to worry about team orders, but he understood the logic in imposing them from now on for the final third of the season. It's obviously been something we've discussed a lot in the last few days, he said. Of course, selfishly, as a driver in my own interests, of course team orders are not that fun, but in saying that, I realize that there's a much bigger picture here than just myself. So I race for a team that's given me my opportunity in F1 and a team that has given me the opportunity to win races in F1 within 18 months of being here. So I have a lot of gratitude for that. This is about much more than just me, and we're trying to achieve both championships, which for the team is an incredibly big thing. The constructors is one thing, but if you have the opportunity to win both championships in the year. Then as a team, of course it's a massive objective to try and achieve both. So of course, being selfish, I would prefer to not have it. But I'm very aware that it's not just about me, and I'm happy to play a supporting role at this point of the season. I think any earlier in the season it would have been probably excessive, but I think now it's an appropriate time to try and help the team win both championships. As for how the team orders will actually affect his racing and approach to battle, Piastri said there are still details up for discussion. I think the main point is it's not purely just going to be me pulling over for Lando every single race, because that's not any of us, including Lando, want to go racing, he said. If we feel that someone has done a much better job on a weekend, whichever way it is, we want that person to be rewarded. That's where it becomes a little bit tricky still, and we need to continue discussing that. But it's not simply a blanket, I'm going to be behind Lando in every single race, in every decision that's ever taken from here on out, because I still have things that I want to achieve in the championship and trying to boost my standing in the Drivers' Championship. Of course, as a team, we're not winning the Constructors' Championship, so we need to make sure that we win that, so it's very important that we maintain that kind of trust and respect. Part of the acceptance behind his understanding of the new dynamic is the fact that Piastri said he can see how the team remembers gestures and actions, things that may pay off for him in the future if the roles are reversed. It's something that won't be forgotten, I guess, in the future, he said. So I know that if it was the other way around, then we would be having exactly the same discussions about driver A or driver B. So I think for me, knowing that it will be remembered in the future. There have been things in the past where, whether it be with upgrades or strategy at some races that have always been remembered in the future, so that's our way of going racing. If it was me in this scenario, then we'd be having exactly the same discussions. For both sides, it's never easy, because as a driver, you always want to win on merit, and because you've done a better job on the day, not because of having assistance. Of course, if it's the difference between winning a world championship or not, then you would take the assistance. But I think the belief and the thinking for all of us in the team is that we want to try and do everything as much as possible on merit, with some help along the way. While George Russell agrees Kevin Magnussen was hard done by at Monza, he argued that perhaps balances times where his punishment was not harsh enough. Magnussen will be forced to sit out the Azerbaijan Grand Prix after reaching the dreaded 12 penalty points mark for his FIA super license, thus making the Danish driver the first to receive a race ban under the system. Magnussen took aim at the FIA after receiving a 10-second time penalty at Monza, followed by those crucial 2 penalty points which triggered the ban, having banged wheels with Alpine's Pierre Gasly at the second chicane, an incident which did not inflict damage on either car. Frustrated about the penalty. "I don't understand it at all," Magnussen told media, including PlanetF1.com after the race. Flat out, just completely confused. "Me and Gasly raced hard into turn 4. We have slight contact. We both missed the corner, came back on track again, no damage to either car, no consequence to the race of either of us, and I get a 10-second penalty. Then, lap 1, Daniel Ricciardo and Nico Hülkenberg. Ricciardo put Nico in the grass at 300 kilometers an hour, completely destroyed Nico's race, massive consequence and damage to Nico's car, and he gets a 5-second penalty. Where's the logic? I just don't get it." Russell agrees that it was a little bit harsh for Magnussen to receive those super license points at Monza, but said it could be argued that some of his past incidents were not dealt with harshly enough. "I mean, it's a conversation that's been had a number of times in previous years, as drivers have sailed close to the wind," Russell told the media ahead of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. "No one's been banned in 12 years, so you could argue, were the penalty points actually harsh enough? For sure, his penalty points from Monza seemed a little bit harsh, but you could also argue some of the other incidents perhaps were not harsh enough." Russell also believes that dangerous or erratic driving needs to be punished with up-and-coming drivers in mind. "I think also we need to set a bit of a precedent as well for the junior series," Russell argued. "Those guys look up to us in F4, F3, F2, and you shouldn't be allowed to get away with dangerous or erratic driving. And at some point you do need to be punished for it." Oliver Bearman returns for his second Super Sub appearance of F1 2024 in place of Magnussen, ahead of his full-time Haas F1 2025 drive, with the team sat P7 in the Constructors' Championship standings. Thanks for watching the video. Drop a comment below on who will win this week's race.